Montana Territory, July 1881. The wagon jolted sharply as it hit a deep rut in the dusty road, throwing the woman inside against a wooden frame. She kicked at the slats and screamed so loud it scattered the crows nesting in the cottonwoods. The wind swept hard across the plains, but her voice tore through it, wild, desperate, and sharp. Up front, the driver, a man with greasy hair and a busted lip, muttered a curse and snapped the reins. "Settle down, girl," he growled. But she didn't. Her foot caught a crate, knocking it over. The horse spooked, stumbling, nearly tipping the whole wagon on its side. A few miles ahead, at the crest of a low hill, a lone rider paused. Shielding his eyes from the sun, he watched the wagon lurch across the prairie below. Something about it didn't sit right. His name was Juan Locke, 32, born and bred on ranch land, his face weathered and a scar slashing across his jaw that made folks stare. He'd spent the last week driving cattle back toward his homestead near the Musselshell River, but that scream stopped him cold. It hit his ears like gunfire. He turned his horse and rode toward it. By the time he reached the wagon, the woman inside had split one of the slats and torn open her knuckles. She looked maybe 24. Her dress was ripped at the hem. Dark hair stuck to her forehead with sweat, and her eyes, wild, furious, defiant. Juan dismounted slowly, voice calm. "What's going on here?" "Move on," the driver barked. "Ain't your business." "She's been sold." Juan stepped forward. "Sold. Bride, trade, out of Billings," the man said. "Her daddy owed money. Some fella in Idaho paid good. I'm just a delivery." From inside the wagon, the woman kicked again. "He's lying. I never agreed to anything. I was taken." One looked between the two. "You got any paperwork?" "Don't need it. She ain't got nobody left." One stared hard. "You sure about that?" The driver's hand twitched toward the shotgun beside him, but Juan was quicker. A single shot cracked into the dirt near the wheel. The man flinched back, hands up. "I don't want trouble," he stammered. "You already brought it." Off the wagon, the man stumbled down. One walked to the back, unlatched the door, and offered a hand. She ignored it, pushing past him and dropping to the ground. Her hands shook, but she held her chin high. Juan took the wagon horse's lead rope, unhitched it, and smacked its flank. The animal bolted. He turned to her. She blinked, barefoot in the dirt, wind tugging at her torn dress. "What?" "You're not property. Not now. Not ever." The driver yelled something behind them, but one raised his revolver again. The man turned and ran, disappearing into plains. The woman looked at Juan like she didn't know whether to trust him or hit him. "Well, Miss Dorsey, you're welcome to ride with me back toward the river. Got a spare horse. Cleanwell, not asking anything, just offering help." She looked away, her shoulders tight. "I don't need rescuing." "Didn't say you did," he said, nodding toward the horizon. "But you look like you could use a place to rest." Her lip trembled. "Just once." Then she nodded. They rode without speaking, side by side across dry, brittle grass. Juan kept a respectful distance. Veda stayed silent. But her breathing slowed, her grip on the reins steadied. By sundown, they reached his homestead, a neat cabin tucked beside a stand of pines, a barn, a small corral, and a cold-running creek in back. He helped her down, careful not to touch her. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep in the barn." She blinked. "You're not keeping me here?" "No, ma'am. You can leave whenever you want." She swallowed. "I don't know where to go." "You don't have to figure that out tonight." She stood there uncertain, then stepped inside. That night, Juan laid out a blanket in the barn. He listened to the wind in the pines, the murmur of the creek. He kept thinking about her eyes, so fierce, even afraid. He'd seen plenty of women break from less. But not her. Inside the cabin, Veda sat on the bed, staring at the wall. She thought about her father's debts, how the men had come in the dark and dragged her out. She remembered fighting, clawing, screaming. No one had listened. No one had helped until now. She curled up in her torn dress and, for the first time in weeks, fell asleep without fear. Morning came bright and cool. Juan was already tending the animals when she stepped outside, sleeves rolled, hair braided back. He handed her a pail. They worked side by side in silence. She gathered eggs, milked the goat. He chopped wood and patched the fence. By midday, they sat on the porch, sipping coffee from tin cups. "You always live out here alone?" she asked. "Mostly. People pass through. I like the quiet." She looked out across the grass. "I used to dream of a place like this." He glanced at her. "You can stay as long as you want. I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said gently. "It's choice." That night she cooked, salt pork and beans, cornbread in an iron pan. They ate beneath the glow of an oil lamp. It hit him like a kick to the chest. He looked away. Days passed. She stayed, helped, laughed just a little. Then came a night of heavy rain. The barn roof leaked. She found him soaked through, trying to fix it. "You're coming inside," she said firmly. "Don't argue with me, One Lock." He followed her in. She handed him a dry shirt and turned her back while he changed. When he sat by the fire, she knelt beside him and dried his hair with a towel. He froze under her touch. She said nothing, just worked gently and slow. When she pulled back, their eyes met. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me, for stopping." He reached up, brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "You were never invisible to me." She stared at him, and something cracked open inside her. She kissed him. It was soft, a whisper of a kiss, but it changed everything. He touched her cheek, thumb warm against her skin. He kissed her back. That night, the storm outside faded into silence. Nothing compared to the warmth between them. The wheatgrass outside had browned at the edges, curling in the sun. The creek behind the cabin had shrunk to a thin trickle. Veda stood at the window with her sleeves rolled, shelling peas into a basin, watching a hawk wheel in the sky above the pasture. She hadn't said much that morning, not distant, just thoughtful. She had started wearing her hair in a loose twist at the nape of her neck, tied with a strip of leather she'd found out in the barn. Her hands moved with quiet rhythm, shelling peas into a tin basin as the breeze stirred the cotton curtains. Juan came in from the barn, his shirt damp at the collar, a splinter buried deep in his thumb. He didn't mention either. "You ever worked with bees before?" he asked, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe. She looked up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Only once, in Shelby. My mother kept 2 boxes behind the boarding house. I got stung twice, and she made a pus out of mustard seed and vinegar. I've got a hive that split last winter," he said, nodding toward the corral. "Needs tending before they swarm." She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped away from a window. "Then show me." They walked out past the fence line to where the wooden box sat tucked in the shade of a cottonwood. The air shimmered with the low hum of wings. One handed her a veil, but she didn't flinch when the bees brushed past her chin. "You ever miss living in town?" he asked as he lifted the lid. "No," she said simply. "I miss people who are gone, not places." He nodded once, inspecting the combs with careful eyes. "You think you'll want to write anyone? Let them know where you landed." "There's no one left," she replied, the words flat but without self-pity. He didn't ask more. They worked in silence, passing the frames between them, brushing bees away with pine branches. When they finished, she helped him seal the box again. "Why do you keep them?" she asked. "Some things are worth the trouble," he said. "Honey's not easy, but it keeps." That night, she sat on the porch steps with her hands wrapped around a mug of Cory brew. Juan came out after washing up, hair damp from the basin, and took a seat beside her. His boots rested in the dirt. "Last spring," she said quietly, "I was supposed to marry a store clerk in Judith Gap. I delayed once, then twice. By the 3rd time, he stopped asking. Did you want it?" "I wanted to want it." She turned her head to him. "What about you? Ever come close?" He shook his head. "Folks tried to pair me with the widow parson's daughter, but she liked lace, and I didn't." She broke it off. "No, I did." She cried. "Her mother cursed me. I deserve both." They sat in silence for a while. A coyote howled somewhere beyond the trees. The wind shifted, carrying the promise of cooler weather. I've been thinking, Vad said, not looking at him, about staying through to the first frost. I can help cut the rye, get the root cellar in order. You don't need to explain yourself, he said. I'm not explaining. I'm deciding. He turned toward her, one brow lifted. She met his eyes, steady. Is that all right? That's more than all right. The next morning, she pulled on a pair of worn trousers she'd found in a trunk in the shed. She tied them at the waist with twine. They fit oddly but gave her room to move. She met one behind the barn, where he was sorting through rusted blades and checking the mule's yoke straps. I'm working the north field first, he told her. I'll take the east, she said. There's less stone. They fell into rhythm, sickle, gather, bind. The sun rode high, and sweat darkened the backs of their shirts. At midday, she brought him water in a tin dipper. He drank without a word. The silence between them was easy now. By dusk, they leaned against the stacked bundles and watched the mule roll in the dirt, legs kicking skyward. She's getting on in years, one said. Might need to trade her come spring. Veda crouched, peeling off her gloves. I could try training the young ran. She's skittish but smart. He looked over at her, the corners of his eyes creasing. You think you can manage her? She hasn't thrown me yet. They walked back to the cabin with their shoulders nearly touching. Inside, Juan lit the lamp while she pulled a pan of cornmeal biscuits from a hearth. The smell filled the room, earthy and warm. They ate close at the table without talking, but the silence had changed again. It no longer carried the weight of caution. It had settled into something steadier, like the feel of worn leather in the palm. Afterward, he cleared the plates while she washed. When he reached to dry, his hand brushed hers. She didn't pull away. But I want you here, not because you feel obligated. I'm not staying out of some sense of debt, Juan. He gave a slow nod. She brushed her fingertips lightly against his wrist. I've felt alone in crowded rooms before, but not here, not with you. He glanced at her hand, then lifted his eyes to meet hers. I don't know what comes after this, he said quietly. We don't need to define it yet. When he leaned in, she didn't hesitate. She met his mouth with her own, steady, certain, and neither of them pulled away. The cottonwoods had just started to turn yellow at their tips, and the air held the faint, earthy sweetness of ripened chokecherries. Out in the rose garden behind the cabin, Veda was picking the last of the beans, collecting them into her apron. Her arms were streaked with soil, and she tucked a dried sprig of yarrow behind her ear without thinking. She didn't notice one watching from a corner of the shed until she turned. You always move that quiet? She asked. Only when I'm unsure what I'm stepping into. She raised her chin. And what do you see now? He stepped closer, wiping his hand with a rag. Someone tougher than most I've ever met. She looked down briefly, then back up at him. I want to fence off the area near the creek. There's space enough for chickens. He folded the rag slowly. You thinking of staying through the frost? I'm thinking of building something. If you want that. He didn't answer right away, just walked over and slipped his hand under hers, fingertips brushing the curve of her palm. I've been wanting to ask, he said, but I didn't want to push you. That evening, he cleared a place in the storage room for her sewing kit and her books. She hung her coat beside his by the door and left it there. By mid-September, the nights grew cold enough for extra quilts. They took turns waking early to light the stove. One morning, while she was kneading dough with her sleeves rolled up, one opened a small tin box he kept hidden beneath the floorboards. From it, he pulled out a folded bundle of cloth and placed it on the table. She wiped her hands, unwrapped it gently. Inside was a ring, simple, unpolished, a bit worn around the band. My mother's, he said. She gave it to me when I left Texas. Told me to hold on to it until it meant something, not just anything. Veda ran her thumb over the band. I never knew what this life would bring, she said, but I didn't expect to feel safe. He said nothing, just reached for her hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit loosely, but she didn't adjust it. The days that followed fell into a steady rhythm. She helped him on the roof, patching the shingles where wind had torn them away. He showed her how to carve cedar for drawer slides, and she taught him how to twist nettle cords strong enough to tie bundles. They spoke more with gestures than with words, handing each other tools, pointing, nodding. One afternoon, sitting together beneath the shade of the wagon he'd never gotten around to taking apart, she asked, "You ever think about what you left behind to stay here?" He leaned back against the wheel. "Only when I wonder what I would have missed." She traced the grain of a knot in the wood. "I still wake up some nights with my hands clenched, like I'm still fighting." "You don't have to explain that." "I want to." She looked over at him. "You saw me at my lowest. I want you to know the rest of me, too." That night, they lay in bed with the window open to the stars. She turned to face him in the dark. "If we ever have a daughter," she whispered, "I want her to know she belongs to herself before she belongs to anyone else." He reached for her hand beneath the quilt. By the first frost, the rye was harvested and stored. The root cellar was full. The bees had stayed in the hive. And on the morning the ground first crackled with ice, Veda stepped onto the porch with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders and a basket in hand. "Chickens will need straw in the coop today," she said. Juan looked up from splitting kindling, and for the first time in either of their lives, the season ahead felt less like endurance and more like home. The wind had shifted west, carrying the scent of snow off the crazy mountains. At the edge of the property, Veda stood watching the ridgeline, the shawl drawn tight around her shoulders. The trees beyond the upper bend had gone full gold, and the stillness in the air signaled the ground would soon freeze deep. Behind her, Juan was fixing the latch on the smokehouse door, hat tugged low against the sharp wind. The hammer paused, and she turned. "Someone's coming," she said. He looked up, eyes following hers to the distant rider. The figure moved slowly, slumped in the saddle, mule burdened with gear. Juan stood, brushing dust from his palms, and walked part way to meet the stranger. The traveler dismounted stiffly, his beard touched with gray, his eyes dulled by distance. He carried the quiet manner of a man long used to being overlooked. "Looking for work?" Juan asked. The man gave a single nod. "Name's Elias Dunn. Heading west. Mule went lame near Sand Creek, so I started walking." "You're a long way out." "Been longer." Juan studied him for a beat, then glanced toward Veda, who had come to stand by the fence. "There's a bunk in the barn, if you're ready to earn your keep." Elias tipped his hat. "I can mend tack, sharpen tools. I don't drink." Juan gave a nod. "That'll do." Elias slipped easily into their rhythm, quiet, dependable, his hand steady and sure. Veda watched him from a distance, intrigued by how he lingered by the creek in the mornings, thumb brushing over a small wooden token he kept tucked in his coat. One evening, while Juan was hauling salt blocks to the field, Veda brought Elias a clean shirt she'd repaired. "The collar was torn," she said, offering it to him. He took it gently, avoiding her eyes. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You lose someone?" His blink was slow. "My daughter, 2 winters back. Fever took her in Idaho. Too far out for a doctor. I'm sorry. She'd be your age now. Maybe older." He folded the shirt across his knee. "You remind me of her." Veda didn't reply, just nodded and turned back toward the cabin. That night, she found one on the porch, boots off, rubbing the sole of one foot. She sat beside him, knees drawn up. "He's not a threat," she said. "I didn't think he was. He won't look anyone in the eye, like he's scared to take up room." Juan leaned back. "Grief can do that. Some men wear it in their spine, it bend them. You ever feel that way?" He met her gaze. "Not anymore." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then lean on me if it comes back." The next week brought a hard freeze. The creek crusted over at its edges, and the trough cracked along the rim. Elias stayed busy, mending a busted fence rail, oiling squeaky hinges on the cabin door, always careful not to overstep. One afternoon, as Veda hung herbs in the pantry to dry, he paused in the doorway. "I'm thinking to move on come the thaw," he said. Juan looked up from the table. "You've earned your way to it." Elias nodded. "Didn't expect to find kindness here." "Thank you. Both." After he stepped away, Veda turned to Juan. "He'll carry that loss wherever he ends up. We all carry something." She walked over and laced her fingers through his. "What are we building here, Juan?" He looked at their joined hands. A life, when we don't have to forget things to live through. She leaned her forehead to his. Then I want all of it, even the long winters. The next day, they cleared out the north side of the barn, laying down boards for a storeroom. At dusk, Veda sat cross-legged by the hearth, darning a wool sock while Juan stirred venison stew over the fire. Her eyes moved around the room. The worn chair, the shelf with her growing collection of books, the quilt sheet piece folded neatly on the cot. "This feels like a beginning," she said. Juan stirred the pot. "It is. I don't want to wait for spring." He turned to her. "Wait for what?" "For us. For vows." He set the spoon down and knelt beside her. "You sure?" "I wasn't. Until I was." The next day, they married beneath the bluff behind the barn, just the two of them and the wind whispering through the trees. He carved a fresh band from cottonwood and slipped it onto her finger beside the first. No vows were spoken. None were needed. Later, with the fire burning low, she lay against his chest as he traced a line of her wrist like it meant something sacred. Outside, the sky deepened, and the season's first snow fell gentle on the roof. Inside, the warmth held. By the end of November, the cabin smelled of pine resin and cured meat. Veda stood barefoot on the wooden floor, humming quietly as she strung dried apple slices onto a length of twine. The season had slowed, less to harvest, more time to think. The hush of snowfall had become familiar now, a silence that wrapped around the house like a blanket.